Hello out there to my distant students. This is a lesson on self-reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. We're going to talk about how he laid the foundation for the Transcendentalist movement and also list some beliefs that most Transcendentalists had at this time. So Ralph Waldo Emerson, in your Springboard book, we have info about the author. Here he is, right here. He was educated at Harvard University, and he was the chief founder of the Transcendentalist movement. Fueled by strong optimism and the belief in the importance of the individual, Emerson helped to inspire social reforms in education, slavery, and the rights of women and Native Americans. Now, that last sentence, that's pretty impressive for the time that he was alive and active. Public education, especially if you weren't rich, kind of didn't exist until the 1800s, early 1900s. Slavery was still going on, so he was an ardent abolitionist, and also once slavery was over, we needed to have some rights for people who formerly were slaves. Women also did not have the right to vote when Ralph Waldo Emerson was alive. Mostly they didn't have any individual rights and were pretty much considered the property of their husbands or male family members or fathers. And Native Americans at that time were suffering from severe restrictions in land and resources, being forced into smaller and smaller areas, forced to leave their ancestral homes, and basically give up all that is unique to them and their culture in order to survive in this new American landscape. So a couple takeaways we need to know about Ralph Waldo Emerson. He definitely inspired later Transcendentalist writers. He kind of created that spark that a lot of the other ones picked up on and continued on. He also loved individuality. Be your own individual. Don't always stick with a group. Don't always stick with an idea. Even Transcendentalism, Ralph Waldo Emerson definitely started it, but he did back away from other people who really labeled themselves as Transcendentalists later on. He also believed in progress without dependence on machines. This was partially in response to the Industrial Revolution, where we went from more of an agrarian type of economy where people were farmers, they were in rural areas, to factories opening up, people getting very industrialized jobs, and also relying on new things that they'd never seen before, never used before, new technologies. And Ralph Waldo Emerson, man after my own heart, DIY or die. He believed in doing it yourself. Don't let other people tell you how to live your life. So let's start looking at from self-reliance. It's only 5 paragraphs in this excerpt, but they're 5 important paragraphs. So our first paragraph starts off with some pretty big statements. He says, "There is a time in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction," so that's a really strong belief, "that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide, that he must take himself for better, for worse, as his portion, that though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to him, but through his toil bestowed on that plot of ground which is given him to till. The power which resides in him is new in nature, and none but he knows what he can do, nor does he know until he has tried." So a few major things in this paragraph. He talks about this conviction, this sort of belief. So we need to know that being envious of other people is ignorance. There's no reason to ever be worried about that. So you need to be yourself because everyone else is taken. There's no reason to be envious because you can't actually make anything happen to make yourself become that person. So just be yourself. Also, imitation. So again, trying to be like someone else or trying to fit in, trying to be something or not is suicide. It's like killing an essential part of yourself. So once you've figured out yourself, you need to figure out what you can do in the world. So he is a little optimistic. He says the wide universe is full of good, but you can't get anything unless you work for it. So to toil is to work. So he's using a farming metaphor here, like you're growing your cornfield, but unless you put in that work on that plot of ground, nothing's going to happen. So you have to work for what you want in the world. Also, some more good things. He's like, not only is the world beautiful and amazing, but mankind is pretty amazing too. The power which resides in him is new in nature. Animals can't do the stuff that humans can do. some of them do have opposable thumbs and they're pretty smart, but they can't do everything we can do. We can plan, we can predict, we can write down things that have happened in history, we can form big social connections that are just not possible in the animal world. And it says none knows what he can do, nor does he know until he's tried. So humans maybe underestimate themselves a whole lot. They're special and powerful, and they need to act like it. So in paragraph 1, you can kind of imagine this beautiful cornfield, all the work that's been put into there. This would be just an empty, barren field if not for that toil bestowed on that plot of ground. And that working for yourself and working for what makes you happy and what you think success is a big thing Emerson believes in. So let's take a look at paragraph 2. So paragraph 2, he's going to go from this idea of the individual into talking about groups or society in general. So paragraph 2 says, society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. Society is a joint stock company in which the members agree, for the better securing of his bread to each shareholder, to surrender the liberty and culture of the eater. The virtue in most request is conformity. Self-reliance is its aversion. It loves not realities and creators, but names and customs. So this first sentence where it says society everywhere is in conspiracy, I mean, you've probably heard of conspiracy theories before. Not saying any of them are possibly correct or not. Maybe. But conspiracy definitely means you think something is not okay going on. So it's saying society has almost this evil plan against the spirit and against the individuality of people. It compares it to a joint stock company. So if you've heard of, the stock market, that's a company which isn't owned by one person. It has a bunch of people buying shares and bits and pieces of the company to invest in it. So when they're investing in society, they're like, hey, I think society's going to do me some good. So I'm going to agree in order to secure my bread, your money, your resources, whatever, I'm going to give up some liberties. I'm going to give up some freedoms. I'm going to give up my culture, my maybe original language, things that make me unique and special and different in order to get that bread. So society is kind of going against that individuality. People are giving up these things for that security. I want to be okay. I want to be safe. I want to have food and money for my family. So that's what I'm going to do for this. And what society wants is conformity. So virtue, the good thing they want, in order to be a good society member, you need to conform. Be like everyone else. Fit in. Self-reliance is the opposite of conforming. So self-reliance says, nope, I'm not going to be like society. I'm going to rely on myself. I'm going to be an individual person and care about what I want to care about. And society also really loves things like labels, boxes, and schedules. So it says it doesn't love realities and creators, but names and customs. People are incredibly unique, and really no two people, even identical twins, can actually be exactly the same. But society doesn't have time for that. Society likes giving names to big groups. It likes people following traditions and following schedules and holidays and things that it can kind of work its life around. It's convenient for society for it to be set up that way. So again, this is Emerson explaining where society is coming from. Society, the group of people, wants what's best for the group. It's going to ask people to give up things, to surrender things. It's going to ask people to fit in, don't stick out, just be like everyone else. And it's really going to put people in these little boxes and labels and things that are expected. So in this case, you can kind of think of it like the stock market. And in our case here, we have Keanu Reeves in his role from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure being very confused by all these screaming people representing society and the ups and downs because he's not about that. His band, Wild Stallions, does not care about this whole big world around him. He just wants to be himself and make people happy with his music. So let's take a look at our next paragraph here. So paragraph 3 is really small, so we've got it paired to paragraph 4. And here we are getting to, again, some of his ideas of what people should be like. Now that he's explained the inner workings of society, what should we do? So paragraph 3 says, whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. He who would gather immortal palms must not be hindered by the name of goodness, but must explore if it be goodness. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. He may as well concern himself with his shadow on the wall. Speak what you think now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again, though it contradicts everything you said today. Ah, so you shall be sure to be misunderstood. Is it so bad, then, to be misunderstood? Pythagoras was misunderstood. And Socrates, Jesus, and Luther, and Copernicus, and Galileo, and Newton, and every pure and wise spirit that ever took flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood. So here we're getting to the powerful part of Emerson's ideas. He says people should be non-conformist. They need to figure out the world for themselves instead of relying on others. So he said, go explore. Don't just sit there and say, oh, that's the right thing to do, that's the good thing to do. No, go test it. Is it the right thing to do? You should be trusting the integrity of your own mind. Also, being consistent, doing the same thing over and over again, is boring. He says that's what people with little minds do. It's adored by little statesmen because they can control things if nothing ever changes. But people with great minds have to change their mind. They have to learn new things and explore and discover, even if they're going to contradict themselves and even if they're going to be misunderstood. So at the end, he has a number of different allusions here, talking about some great men. He talks about Pythagoras, you may know from the Pythagorean theorem. He talks about Socrates, kind of important dude, philosopher. Jesus, of course, very important religious leader. We have Luther, Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr., but just Martin Luther here, who was also integral in religious movements. He also talks about Copernicus. This is Galileo, who's another scientist, talking a lot about the solar system and how we see the stars, and Sir Isaac Newton, who you might remember from the apple falling on his head and discovering gravity, or inventing calculus. Or maybe you don't like him for inventing calculus. That's okay too. So basically all the cool guys were misunderstood. So you have to change your mind. It's okay to be misunderstood. In our last paragraph, he's kind of summing a lot of things up that he doesn't like about society. It's a little, old man yells at cloud from The Simpsons, but he's making a point. So in paragraph 5, remember this is the 1800s where we're in, he says the civilized man has built a coach, so think like the coach carriage with horses, but has lost the use of his feet. He is supported on crutches, but lacks so much supportive muscle. He has got a fine Geneva watch, but he has lost the skill to tell the hour by the sun. A Greenwich nautical almanac has he, and so, being sure of the information when he wants it, the man of the street does not know a star in the sky. The solstice he does not observe, the equinox he knows as little, and the whole bright calendar of the year is without a dial in his mind. His notebooks impair his memory. His libraries overload his wit. The insurance office increases the number of accidents, and it may be a question whether machinery does not encumber, does not hold us back, whether we have not lost by refinement some energy, by a Christianity entrenched in establishments and forms, some vigor, some energy of wild virtue. For every Stoic was a Stoic, but in Christendom, where is the Christian? So here he's saying, we shouldn't depend on technology for everything. Of course, technology is extremely useful. It has changed and saved a number of lives today, but we still need to have some skills on our own. We need to be able to do things just in case something happens and you don't have any access to that technology. And this is again responding to the Industrial Revolution. He's afraid that mankind is losing all the knowledge it has gotten because it's relying on all of these things to do it for them. He also has some words against the church here at the end. He talks about how Christianity is entrenched in establishments and forms. So all these traditions that keep on going, they're kind of just going because they're traditions and not because they're necessarily very good ones. So he's arguing at this time that established Christian traditions really aren't very Christ-like. He's looking around, he's like, where are the Christians? Because this doesn't seem like a Christian way of life. So in this case, in our, society, we have things like self-driving cars of the future. This is obviously a prototype, very fancy. You don't even need a windshield. You don't even need to know which way you're going. You can just sit back and enjoy the ride. But some people like driving. Some people want to have manual control of their transmission and want to be able to push their car to extremes. And they don't want to be driven everywhere in a silver bullet taxi. So these are some things to consider for From Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. I hope this helps you understand the passage a little bit more, and I will see you next time.